everyone, and welcome to another Scots Whay podcast. And today I'm joined by iWrite programmer Bob McDevitt. Hello, Bob.
Hello, Alec. Nice to be here.
I guess what I'd like to start is just talking about what that title means. What does it mean to be a programmer of a literary festival?
Well, I think so. iWrite's one of 3 festivals that I program, and they're all different. So actually, the job can be quite a different thing. And for the 3 festivals that I program, there are different versions of the same job. So first of all, I suppose I would say I'm not on my own. So it's never a dictatorship. So there's with iWrite, there's a steering group. So we have a bunch of people who meet fairly regularly, and that's comprised of authors, publishers, some book industry people, Publishing Scotland, Creative Scotland are in there, and every year, very early on, so probably just towards the end of September for the following year, we'll get together, look at things like what anniversaries we might be marking, any authors that we're particularly keen to get along, any themes, any strands in the festival, anything we want to do differently. We'll talk about the previous year, maybe things that didn't work, things that did work, a bit more of that, bit less of that kind of thing. So it's quite an interesting meeting for me at that point. And then what happens is I start to speak to publishers. So having got my ideas and my themes ready, I'll go round the Scottish publishers. Publishing Scotland are very helpful. They usually organise me a wee speed dating session, which is quite nice. Go and see a lot of Scottish publishers very quickly in 20-minute slots. We try and take at least a title from all the publishers I see. I think if someone goes to the bother of pitching and putting a presentation to us, we take at least one of their titles. So I feel quite strongly about that in terms of Scottish publishing. And then I will go to London and tour the mixture of the bigger houses. So go to all the HarperCollins and Hachette's and Transworlds and Random Houses. But I also think it's important to see some of the smaller boutique publishers as well. So go to Profile and Atlantic and Faber and some of the, just trying to get a nice mix into the programme.
Sure. It's interesting, I think, that you go to the Scottish publishers first, because what I feel about iWrite is it's certainly international in the way that it looks, and you get lots, and you have this year got lots of people coming from abroad, but it does have that kind of Scottish heart to it.
Yeah. It's actually a much less international. It's much less international than Edinburgh.
Yeah, sure, well, of course.
iWrite, a wee bit of history of iWrite. It's very much grown out of Glasgow City Council and the Glasgow Libraries who support the festival. So it's not it doesn't have a big money sponsor. It doesn't have a title sponsor. The festival is very much of the council and of the library, the Glasgow Library. So it traditionally has been a very Glasgow-centred festival. Glasgow writers have always been very important to the mix. So a lot of people have got their start at iWrite. People who have gone on to be much bigger names. People like Louise Welsh and Graham McRae Burnett and people like that who have started with maybe a debut session or a small panel at iWrite. And the other thing about the city is it features very heavily in the non-fiction at the festival. But always lots of very good local history, social history, biographies of Glaswegian, whether it's sports people or musicians or writers or artists, they've always featured very strongly. So although you're right, and there are always, we've got writers from Iceland and from Norway, and it's actually quite a Scottish festival. It's actually quite
I've spoken to quite a few who have said, well, I went from writing my book in the cafe to eventually, talking about it on stage.
I think quite a few people, because there are the paid for ticketed events, but there's also a lot of community free events as well. So I think people will have started maybe coming to free event, and there's also a lot of creative writing sessions. So every year, different sessions on novel writing, writing for TV, writing for radio, writing poetry master classes, things like the Mirror Ball, poetry night. So I think a lot of people will have got a start or got, we hope, some inspiration from coming along to
so I mean, having the centre of it is always at the Mitchell Library, which I take it was almost essential.
The first 10 years it was all at the Mitchell, and then this is my 4th year programme, and it's gradually seeped out into the city. So and I mean the reasons for that are many. partly there are rooms at the Mitchell that we can't use anymore, so the Mitchell Library isn't quite as usable as a venue as it once was.
Okay.
So there's a couple of building issues with the Mitchell, which we hope will be resolved at some point in the future, but at the moment we can't use, for example, the main hall, the big lovely main hall which we used to use. That's out of action at the moment, so that meant we had to look for similar sized venues elsewhere in the city. And also there was this idea of taking the festival to the people of the city, using other cultural venues, so places like the GFT, this year CCA, where we're sitting at the moment. This is one of our venues. We're using Tramway this year, we're using the city halls and the concert hall. And what that's allowed us to do this year with all the different venues is to interact with lots of different audiences. So using somewhere like Tramway for an example, Tramway is quite a different audience to the usual Mitchell I Write audience. Yeah. So by being in the Tramway programme and on their social media, having posters up at Tramway, it's taking us to a whole different audience. Similarly with the GFT, it takes us, so the event that we've got at the GFT is a film screening with an author talking, so it's Nick Chickwell talking about the film Get Carter.
Yeah.
So it's quite a nice little mixture of the two worlds, so mixing the film cultural audience with the book cultural audience, which probably aren't that far apart.
And also I think just branching out to different areas of the city, you get some stuff at the Glasgow Uni Chapel, so into the West End, and as you know, there are people that don't maybe like to get a nosebleed and think outside the West End. Similarly, being in the Tramway, myself being in the South Side, I know some people go, it's round the corner for me, I'm going to go to something there. So I think it is definitely a positive.
The slight problem for me is I can't be everywhere, so it's a real shame, because when everything was in the Mitchell, I would run around slightly daft, trying to see at least 10 minutes of everything, and I've had to make my peace with it this year. I can't be everywhere, so it's a shame that it really is, because obviously when you've invited authors to come, it's very nice to do them the courtesy of being there for at least a little bit of their talk. But I'm going to try and look at the rota, look at the schedule, and work out where I sort of most need to be.
So going back to that idea of it being a Glasgow-based festival, as it's grown and it's got better known, were you ever tempted to change the focus of it, or maybe go for American writers, or
Yeah, I mean, the focus does change every year. So I would say even the four festivals that I've programmed we've had different ideas, new strands, different things do come up. So for example, in 2015, when there was a Scottish election, we had the leaders of the 5 main parties come and do. So we have a strand called The Books That Made Me, where we asked non-writers, so people who aren't known for being writers, perhaps comedians or artists or musicians, to come along and pick 5 books that have been instrumental in their own lives. And that year we had the leader of the 5 political parties to come along and pick their books. It's quite an interesting thing, that, because you're asking these people to be human beings and not be politicians for an hour, which was I thought quite an interesting glimpse into their lives. So we do have things every year that are different. We started the Icon series a couple of years ago, which is an attempt to look at, I always hesitate to say a younger mark, but a slightly younger market. Graphic novels, comics, fantastic fiction, and that's been pulling in a different audience again. So I think the programme does change.
It's interesting, when I started spreading the news about what was going on this year, it was the Icon stuff which people from all over Scotland were saying, okay, because it's a big readership. And maybe people don't realise what a big readership that it is.
So very, very interesting. The slight problem you ask about visiting Americans and international is that we don't have an enormous travel budget. So I think you need to be a slightly bigger and slightly more well-heeled festival before you can start inviting people to come from the US. You occasionally luck out and somebody happens to be on a promotional tour just as the festival happens, and you might get someone come across, but we don't have very deep pockets to bring people over. So that's one of the slight problems.
So talk about the other strands happening. I think you've kept on the Books That Made Me
Books That Made Me's happening again this year. Yeah, we've got Jackie Kay So Jackie's been at the festival many times before, and we thought it'd be quite interesting to get her talking this year about books that have inspired her, rather than talking. Obviously, this will be the first festival she's done. She did the Mackers event last year when she'd just been announced as the Scottish Macker, so we thought quite a nice time to get her talking about books that made her. And we've also asked Adele Patrick, Dr. Adele Patrick from Glasgow Women's Library. Lots of stuff in the programme this year. It's 100 years since some women got the vote. I'm sure you've been aware of all the endless publicity. We've got Helen Pankhurst, who was the great-granddaughter of Emmeline Pankhurst at the festival this year. So we thought Adele, one of the founders of Glasgow Women's Library, very nice to get her talking about her favourite books. We've got Amar Anwar, the human rights lawyer, again, who's been at the festival before in a different capacity. Got him talking about the books that made me. And we've got Sir James McMillan, the composer. He's actually one of the opening events on Thursday. So he's again quite a controversial figure, interesting figure in Scottish culture. So really fascinated to see what he comes up with.
And there are strands, even if they're not maybe official, like there's music.
iTunes, that was one of my puns, you can blame me for that one. We've got iTunes this year.
Scots Whay, I can't remember what that.
So yeah, music's always been an important part. Over the years, a lot of good people have appeared at the festival. Tracy Thorne from Everything But the Girl, and Peter Hook from New Order we had a couple of years ago, and so it's always been nice to have these. So yeah, this year we've got Brett Anderson from Suede. I've just finished reading his book. It's great. It's not what I expected actually. It's a proper book. It's a proper childhood memoir. Really interesting. He's only 2 years younger than myself, so I found that I absolutely identified with all the cultural references and what have you through the book, so that's a really good one. We've got a terrific tribute event to Michael Mara. So this is a sort of companion event to the event that was on at Celtic Connections this year. So James Robertson's published this lovely, unusual memoir of Mara, where he speaks to a lot of Mara's friends. The book is a beautifully illustrated book. It contains a lot of Mara's artwork, and it talks about his work as an actor and a writer, and writing for theatre as well as a songwriter. So Celtic Connections had a lovely event this year with Alice Mara, Michael's daughter, and Karine Polwart and Rab Noakes doing a sort of musical appreciation of his life, and what we've got is James with Liz Lockhead doing a sort of books and a writing lyrics version of the event. So they'll be in conversation with Janice Forsyth talking about Michael Mara, so very much looking forward to that. When I went to the Celtic Connections event, it was just
because for those who don't know Michael Mara's stuff, he's as much poet as he is musician, or as was musician. I mean, he's incredible.
Absolutely, and what came across very strongly at the Celtic Connections event was this, wicked sense of humour and wicked, just a tremendous thirst for knowledge and culture, and just interested in absolutely anything and everything. So I think that will be a very good one. We have the Fun-Loving Crime Writers, which is, I don't know, your listeners may or may not know about that, but this is a super group that has been formed by a bunch of crime writers. So Val McDermid, the great Val McDermid on lead vocals, Chris Brookmeyer, who people will know, Mark Billingham, Luca Vesti, Stuart Neville, and Doug Johnson on drums. And they're really good, I have to say. They're better than I thought they were going to be.
Well, I know Doug is a musician as well, but it's a good time.
Well, they opened Bloody Scotland for us last year, and I thought it'd be a bit of a pub band, And actually, they're pretty tight. Good musicians and a nice selection of tunes. So their songs have all got a criminal theme. So they cover things like Psycho Killer and Watching the Detectives and I Love Her But I Had to Kill Her. And so the songs have all got a criminal theme to them. So they're pretty good. And that's one of our Friday night tramway gigs. So again, something a wee bit different for iWriting, not an obviously bookish event, but I think interesting for an iWrite audience.
You talked a little bit about your programme as a whole, but what about individual events? How difficult it is to get the right balance of writers in events?
Well, I mean, I've gone to a lot of events over the years. As you say, I'm involved with 2 other festivals. I do a lot of chairing at Edinburgh. I used to work at the Dundee Literary Festival. Way back in my ancient history, I used to be an events programmer for Waterstone, so I started off doing book events at the Edinburgh East End branch of Waterstones, and it drives me crazy when I see badly paired sessions at other festivals. Sometimes you see two authors and think, why on earth are these? I don't understand. There's no obvious theme, or there's nothing, or the people don't get on and don't like each other. And sometimes I've been chairing something and thought, I don't really know why these people have been put together. So I do spend quite a lot of time trying to think, are the books complementary to each other? And if they are from different points of view, is that interesting in itself? So there's nothing more boring than two people who just spend the whole hour going, yeah, that's what I think too. So I try and avoid that. So and also I think the I-Write audience like a wee bit of a rammy. They like a wee bit of a little bit of a bit of controversy and a bit of a wee bit of a fight. So I try and put things that are a little bit, you might get different points of view coming across. So we do spend quite a lot of time. You are tied by what's published, so it's quite a difficult. That is the most difficult part of programming the festival, is that your festival is only ever going to be as good as the books that are out. We don't have an absolute hard and fast rule that everything has to be a brand new published book. So you can't, there are elements where you think, oh, that new book that's just been published goes very well with a book that came out 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So we'll stick them together. So you can do a little bit about that. Not too much though. I think in order for the festival to feel current and as if it's responding to the headlines and what people are actually talking about now, putting a book that came out 3 years ago and something may have changed and things may have moved on, maybe feels a bit wrong. So.
And over the years that you've either been going or programming it, have you seen the audiences change, the people that turn up?
I think book festival audiences are quite reliable.
Yeah.
They look pretty the same to me, whichever festival I go to, which is interesting in Scotland. To a fault, perhaps. I think we could certainly do with being a little bit more diverse. The audiences are very white and very middle class, and so I think that is something we should be thinking about. Last year with I-Write, we started a community ticketing programme. So this was an initiative working through the library's community teams, trying to get people to come to the festival who perhaps hadn't come for whatever reason before, and those reasons were varied. The Mitchell Library is a funny building for some people. That some people feel it's not for them, and it's an exclusive. Because it's posh looking, it looks a bit like the Albert Hall. It's got a dome, and it's not. Some people think, people like me aren't supposed to go into that building. So we try to overcome that. Our tickets cost money, and not everyone can afford £9 or £10 for an hour session with an author. So we try to mitigate that. Try to offer a certain amount of free tickets through the community teams to people who perhaps couldn't afford to come to the festival. And simple geography as well. Some people just don't come into the town, depending on where they live.
Sure.
So we have tried quite hard. Worked pretty well last year. We've actually had almost twice as much uptake this year as we had last year. So
Fantastic.
It's looking quite good. And we targeted some specific communities this year. We have Saida Varsi, Baroness Varsi, the Tory peer, coming. She was very keen to connect with the Muslim community of Glasgow, so we've done quite a bit of work working with Muslim communities, trying to deliver an audience for her. So I think it is important to think about those things. Although, having said all of that, your festival is going to be a success based on who buys the tickets. So you don't want to turn away your core audience. You don't want to program a festival that's so out there and so radical that all the people who normally like coming to I-Write feel excluded from it. So it's a tricky one. I think it's something you should be mindful of, but try and.
Have you ever put something on and said, well, I'm not sure if this is going to work, and actually not only has it worked, but you've looked around the audience and when this isn't our usual group, that you've actually managed to bring people in?
So I think probably in every programme there'll be 2 or 3 things that are a wee bit of a risk, that are for exactly that reason. I mean, I suppose the band I was just talking about, Fun Loving Crime Writers, is a little bit like that, because it's not a book event really, and it's not, I don't know whether a couple of hours of rock and roll is what I write audiences want on a Friday night. I'm glad to say it's selling quite well, so it appears to be that that's worked quite well. A couple of years ago we had George Mpanga, George the poet.
Yes.
He was actually just on Question Time last night. I was watching him, and he came along. He was something quite different for I write. And what you're saying rings true, because that was a very different audience. It was a younger audience. It was a more racially diverse audience. He definitely brought. He's a rapper and musician as well as a poet, so he brought that younger music crowd along to the event. So I think you've got to take chances on some of these things. Otherwise, the festival would stagnate and would be exactly the same every year. So I think we do try and find new and interesting things.
And do you approach I Write differently than you do Bloody Scotland and you're saying the
Pitlochry Winter Awards? Yeah. So yes, the festivals have all got a really different personality. So Bloody Scotland, because it's a genre festival, because it's a crime writing festival, it benefits from that incredibly passionate readership. So crime readers and crime writers have this, lovely romantic thing going on where the readers just can't get enough of the crime fiction. So these writers are often delivering a book every year. Some are delivering 2 books a year, different under different nom de plumes. And the crime audience just laps it up. So it's got a real party atmosphere. It's a one weekend in Stirling. It's also a destination festival, so people tend to go to Stirling for Bloody Scotland in a way that I Write isn't a destination festival. I Write's mostly attended by Glaswegians. We have a little bit of travel, but not that much. Bloody Scotland's the other way around. It's almost everyone has gone to Stirling, so they've gone for a weekend and they're there to have a good time. Pitlochry Winter Awards is different again. It's a slightly older audience. It's a Perthshire, quite nice, lots of tweed. But it's a lovely festival. I love that again. It's a weekend festival. It's a lovely place to go. What a lovely place to have a book festival. Beautiful setting, and every author, without exception, who comes up mentions something about the location of that theatre. It's beautiful, right on the river. It was snowy this year as well. It's even more beautiful than a winter wonderland outside. It's a festival that's done very well traditionally with non-fiction. It's tied to the Banff Mountain Film Festival, so quite a lot of adventuring. We do well with climbing events. It's had people like Chris Bonington, Neil Oliver, those kind of headliners do well. We had Cameron McNeish this year, Paul Merton. Both of whom are at I Write. And Cameron McNeish's book I'm just reading at the moment is very, very good. So they do very well with that kind of thing. Not so well with fiction. They struggle a little bit with fiction. Although having said that, we had Sally Magnuson this year with the Soulman's Gift, her new Icelandic saga. Yes. Also at I Write, and she had a good audience, but obviously well known from the telly. Yeah. So, go back to I Write. You've got a lot of kids events as well every year. You've got We Write is a separate festival, so I don't programme We Write. So my colleague Margaret Houston programmes the We Write festival. We were scuppered this year by the snow, I'm afraid, so the whole We Write should have been last weekend, and it was all cancelled this year because of the snow, so not such a good story this year. We are going to reschedule, so the idea is to put it all on, so everything that was going to be on last weekend, we're looking for a weekend in late May, early June, and we'll do it again. In previous years, it's been great. So we've had Julia Donaldson, Mary Hedderwick. We had so it's usually a nice mix of big name children authors, and then the science of Star Wars. We would have had the 80th anniversary of the Beano this year, had it gone ahead. So it's always a really nice mix, and it's lovely seeing the Mitchell Library full of kids for the family days. We have had the schools programme this week, so the schools managed to miss the snow, so that's been happening all this week. So it's been quite nice. We had and I guess really important for the future of not just I Write, but anyone involved in books in Scotland. Get them while they're young. Get them while they're young. Absolutely. It's really interesting. We were talking about this just yesterday. How I suppose people my age, when we were growing up, we never met authors. I don't ever remember authors coming into school to talk to us. It just wasn't something we did. And I think kids these days There's a lot of opportunities. I think a lot of authors go into schools
Yeah.
to do events. There are children's festivals in Edinburgh. Look at the stuff that's on at the Edinburgh International Book Festival every year. We write. There are a lot of opportunities, I think, for children to interact with authors.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I'm just thinking, like, when I was at secondary school, we didn't. I don't blame them, but we didn't have anyone coming into our school.
Yeah.
And yet now, a lot of the writers that I've spoken to over the years, that's part of what they see as the job, you know, that they go in and...
I mean, we think it's really important in terms of inspiring kids to write themselves, because I think it does demystify. I think if you see someone talking about their book and you realise that they're just a woman, just a man, you know. Well, I think perhaps when I was young, you know, a book writer, I'm not even sure that I knew your books were written by someone who didn't know where books came from. You know, so I think it's quite an interesting. You know, I think that humanising, putting a face on a writer thing works very well. So,
I can remember being taken to Stirling University when I was in maybe about 5th year at school to see Carl McDougall was doing a reading, and that was a big moment for me because I went, oh, he sounds like me, and he's a writer, which again, it was a big step to can do that. I think if you can get people to realise that, you know, it's an important thing.
A lot of the children's events we have as well are pretty interactive as well, so it doesn't tend to be so much like the grown-up events where it does tend to be someone reading from the book and taking it, although they'll take questions. A lot of the children's authors come with a sort of workshoppy approach, so a lot of it will be to do with illustration, writing their own stories, where do you get a character from, how important is a place, a location, thinking about, you know, lots of different aspects of how a book's put together. So.
You've mentioned a few things which are on this year. Do you have any other highlights that you want to...
Things that I'm looking forward to?
Yeah.
I've just read Gail Honeyman's book, right. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine.
Yeah, I've not read it, but...
Well, I have to say I don't think it's something I would have picked up. It didn't really look like my kind of thing at all. But she's come to the festival, and a few people I know had read it and said it's really brilliant. I have to say it really is, so heartily recommend it. It's set in Glasgow, a really interesting character, so a woman who is simultaneously quite sad and very, very funny, which I thought was really a difficult thing to pull off, and she pulls it off really, really well. So Gail's coming with Sarah Winman, the author of Tin Men, comes to this, so very much looking forward to that. And I am looking forward to Chris Bonington, actually.
Fantastic,
So he, as I say, did Winter Words a few years ago before I programmed the festival. Since then, he's published this autobiography called Ascent. So he's one of our big names at Tramway. Very much looking forward to meeting him. Some of the debut events this year are really interesting. So we started a couple of years ago a strand called I Write Introduces, where I have established writers introducing a pair of debuts. I saw you talk to David Keenan. He was one of our debuts last year.
Fantastic.
Terrific book. So this year we've got Denise Minor, John McGregor, who was shortlisted for the Booker, Louise Welsh, and Lynn Anderson, the crime writer. Lynn Anderson. So the four of them have all got pairs of debut writers coming. I think just a fascinating array of different things. So
I think these events are really good because a lot of people think, oh, there's no one new out there's no new writers coming through, and these events really show that.
Yeah, I mean they're difficult for festivals to do because they don't draw big audiences, so they often don't pay for themselves and don't, you know. But I sort of don't care about that.
Yeah.
I sort of think it's really important that these authors get their first chance on a festival, and as I said earlier on, it's amazing how 2 or 3 years later you'll see some of these people, you know, selling loads of books, being shortlisted for prizes. It's really, you know, it's really nice to see that. So I would urge people to come along and support your debut writers. There's people like Danny Denton and Mick Kitson are on together with Denise Minor. Louise has got Imogen Hermes-Gower, who's just been longlisted for the Women's Fiction Prize. So very, very sort of hotly anticipated book that, and seems to have been getting amazing reviews. So there's some really nice stuff in there. So.
And I know that John McGregor's event is Chris McQueer is one of the
That's right.
producers. who is a fantastic reader.
Yeah, so John's event is actually 2 short story writers.
Yeah,
so it's again we try and include some genre fiction. So Lynn's got some crime writers. Jim Carruth does poetry every year, so we have some poetry. This is the second year we've had short story. Again, short stories pretty difficult to get onto a book festival program, because people will tell you they don't really sell and they don't really sell tickets and all that. So what do you do if you're a young writer and your first collection of short stories has come out, there's nowhere to go? So 2 Chris's, Chris McQueen and Chris Power.
That's it.
Didn't put them together just because they were called
2 Chris's, if you like your writers called
You like your writers called Chris.
So being involved in these festivals, I think festivals seem to have expanded, not just book festivals but music festivals, food festivals, all sorts. It's, think of a reason for that? It's just a different way of interacting with the culture.
I mean, they certainly all seem to be in rude health. I mean, the 3 festivals that I'm involved with this year were all bigger than they were the previous year, and the previous year they were all good. So it wasn't, they're all growing very nicely. So people are certainly enjoying attending festivals and coming back for more the next year, which is good for me. Keep me in a job. In terms of why that is, I think there's a lot of talk about how digital our lives are and our culture is, and how everyone spends too long looking at screens and watching telly and playing video games and not really interacting. So I suppose festivals give you a live human opportunity to speak to people and listen to ideas and disagree with them and ask questions and talk about it in the pub afterwards. And so I think that's quite an important driver of getting people along to festival. People seem to just genuinely like being in a room with someone that they like, whether it's a musician or an artist or a novelist or a poet, and being in that space. And also I think the getting the book signed and having a selfie taken with them and having that little moment of contact with the person that you admire, it's certainly something to talk about in work the next day and see what you do.
I think the genre of crime is really interesting that way, because after not reading much crime for a long time, after Saraban set up Contraband and I started reviewing some of their books, I started to get really into it, and then I started going to events, and the events were all mob, and everyone seemed to know each other, and there was a real sense of, right, this is a night out for us, and as you say, you get to talk to the writers know them, and there's a real community sense, and people want the books, they really want to devour the new books. And I think, suppose if you take that and add it to other areas, then it might be the same thing.
It is interesting. It also makes the books better as well. I think there's people. I feel sorry for them, but I feel for crime writers in that they must have this tremendous the next one has to be an absolute corker. I mean, where do the next lot of ideas come from, and how do you improve on last year's part of Bloody Scotland is obviously the Michael Van Prize. So we've just opened the prize this year for 2018, which is for the best Scottish crime book of the year, and it's incredible. I mean, the standard in there, the 10 long-listed books, 12 in fact, 10 the year before, 12 long-listed books last year, which, there was a razor blade of quality between them. How you can divide it.
Well, that's what I came to realise, after probably having a stereotype about what Scottish crime fiction was and the Tartan Law label and all of those things, and then just went, well, there's as many different crime books out there.
I mean, this idea that it's all hard drinking, hard men is nonsense. There's, first of all, a tremendous amount of women writing, from all different kinds of backgrounds and all different kinds of lifestyles. There's historical, there's more literary books. Something like Graham McCrae Burnett's His Bloody Scotland or something like that. We embraced that as a crime novel, even though it was shortlisted for the Booker, and I think an incredibly impressive literary piece of work. So I think every now and then I read things saying, "Oh, is there too much focus on crime in Scotland? Do we worry about it? Do we is it focused on to the detriment of other kinds of writing?" I suppose in the end that sometimes they sell more, or they sell a bit more copies.
Yes.
But
but the quality of the writing is there without a doubt.
I think it's very silly to criticise something when we're punching above our weight, in such a way.
I think it's a few years ago now, quite a few years ago now, we talked to Karen Campbell, whose first three novels had been crime books, and then she went on to write some fantastic literary fiction. But she used to complain about the way that her first three books were marketed. I thought it was very similar, and not the books itself, but that's nothing to do with the quality of the writing.
I know Karen a little bit, and I think she was right, and I think she never felt like a crime writer, really. And I think that although she was a policewoman, she was a former policewoman, and the character in the book, it could have been seen as quite an autobiographical sort of novel, but I think she was trying to use her life experience to look at an interesting area of human emotion and experience in a way I think that she felt wasn't popular, it wasn't the kind of thought-driven crime novel. But of course the publisher sold it that way. Of course, if you've got a former policewoman writing a crime novel about a former policewoman, you're going to sell it that way. So I could see both sides of that argument. I could see why it was sold that way.
I think she probably could as well. I think she was aware of it. I just think it kind of sat, as you say, maybe just a bit uneasy. So those are some of the highlights of this year's, but what about all-time highlights? Have you ever kind of had events where you go, oh my God, it's whoever?
Yes, you do have heroes. So Armistead and Wapa, I read those Tales of the City books, which I devoured when I was a younger man than I am today. I saw him in Edinburgh a few years ago, and that was a real special moment to sort of meet someone just because I had read all the books twice. And Paul Auster at the Edinburgh International Book Festival, again, a novelist that I admire tremendously, and I think Edinburgh have been trying for 15 years or something to get him to come to the festival, and finally he came last year, sold out in 2 minutes. I didn't get a ticket, fortunately. I know a man who knows a man who got me into that one, but that was great as well. It was just fantastic to see. So yeah, I mean, I think that's in the back of my mind when I'm programming the festival as well. You always want to get a few heroes and heroines in there, a few people where you think who's going to I suppose people like Chris Bonington's an example of that. So,
Graham Aubrey as well.
Graham Aubrey. So you see already on Twitter, people saying absolute legend. Can't wait to come in. Really fascinating guy. Met him up in Pitlochry as well. Absolute quality assured. Come to the event. Someone like Helen Pinecrust as well. Tremendous history there. Tremendous lineage, tremendous family. Very well timed. Obviously, that's why the book's coming out this year. But something like that. So I think it's always really nice to look for these kind of inspirational moments. We've got a centenarian coming. We've got there's a book called The Century Girls, written by Tessa Dunlop, which focuses on the lives of 6 centenarian women. So it's women who've been alive for the 100 years since some women got the vote. And one of the women is called Phyllis from Edinburgh, and she's going to be at the event. So we've got a 100-year-old, 100-odd-year-old Phyllis coming over from Edinburgh for the event. So I think that kind of, you want those little moments of magic at the festival.
Of course you do, yeah. Well, moving on a little bit from I Write, often you see on social media whatever what people are up to, but this year your name has come up in relationship to Men in Kilts.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about that.
Yes, my literary masterpiece.
Yes. Everyone's got a magnum opus in them.
They say everyone's got a book in them, and I spend all this time hanging around with authors. I thought, you know what, I'm going to pause on my book. Yes, there's no writing in it whatsoever. There's about one paragraph, I think, of text. But I'm a photographer as well, so in my other life, I take photographs, mostly portraiture. I do quite a lot of show photographs, theatre photographs. And I was approached last year with this idea of doing a book of handsome Scottish fellas in kilts in various locations around. So we published in November last year 101 Men in Kilts as a sort of slightly daft Christmas stocking filler. But it was good. It was really good fun. It got a tremendous amount of press, which I was amazed by. Loads of papers picked it up. I suppose it was nice and easy. St Andrew's Day and then into Christmas. So and the boys are all pretty easy on the eye, so there's some nice picture stories ran in the papers, and we got on the telly, we did an interview on STV. So it was all a bit funny, but I feel completely weird being on the other side of that author equation, because I obviously don't feel like an author at all. Although it is quite nice. It's quite nice having your name on a book on a bookshelf. I'll say that much.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, as well as doing festivals, and you were in publishing as well.
Yeah. So I mean, really, the bulk of my career in books was working in publishing in a variety of different roles as well. So I was a sales rep up in Scotland. So I sold books for Headline. Then went to London and worked as an accounts manager. So I worked as a key accounts manager. So selling into Waterstones, W. Smiths, and a very, very young Amazon. So when Amazon had just started, no one really believed in them, and it was quite interesting at the time, because I'm talking about 14 or 15 years ago.
Wow.
Now, so they really were quite small, and they were losing money, and everyone was saying, this is going to go nowhere. And also they were one of a number of other internet, so there was Ball and Be Well, and there are other people who
were trying it.
Any one of them could have gone big, but I will say, going into Amazon at the time, there was this incredible confidence, it was almost like going into a cult. Everyone spoke about Amazon, as this, huge thing that was coming down the line, and there we are. So and then after that, I moved back to Scotland and set up Hachette Scotland. So we had a commissioning base in Scotland, which was really interesting. So that was 8 or 9 years that I did that. Published people like Robert Douglas, Gary Moffat, Crown writer, Sue Lawrence, the Scottish chef Alan Bissett, who you'll know. So that was a really nice, period of my working life, spending time working with Scottish authors, discovering new names, trying to get people a leg up onto a slightly higher level of sales. But the financial crash came, and basically Hachette rationalised its business and got rid of the stuff they didn't need. And sadly, Scotland was something they didn't need. Yeah, so I was made redundant in 2011, and since then I've been festival guy.
So you've still been getting these authors in there, but just the festivals.
Yeah, so it's actually been really nice. So a lot of people have reappeared over the years. So Gary Moffat, the crime writer that we published at Hachette Scotland, came to Bloody Scotland last year. Yeah. He's gone to a digital-only publisher to publish his new novel. So he's, again, a very modern story of publishing. He's come along. Alan's obviously gone from strength to strength as a playwright.
Yeah, so absolutely. Not just like his most recent Moira monologue.
Moira 2. So yeah, it's nice to follow these people. And Sue Lawrence, of course, has swapped cooking for crime fiction. So she's writing.
Because she was a MasterChef
winner. Yes, that's right. Yeah. She's writing crime fiction now. So yeah, it's nice to. You know what Scotland's like. It's a small place.
It's a small place.
The cultural community is very small. You tend to come across the same people again and again. So,
well, just to finish off, how do you now view the state of Scottish culture in that way? I mean, not the word consume's a horrible thing to do, but the way that people are interacting with it.
I mean, given the jobs that I do, I feel that it's very lively. I mean, there's a lot. I'm constantly surrounded by interesting writers, interesting people. As I say, whether that's poets or musicians who are songwriters who are also writing novels, or filmmakers who are also writing novels, So I mean, to me, Scottish culture feels pretty alive. I know there's much. There's been a lot of concern about funding this year, various different things. Look at what's happening at Scottish Youth Theatre just now. That's a terribly sad story. There are obviously difficult days ahead for some organisations, but I don't think the basic inspiration is missing. I don't think the desire to create good culture.
I think the will of the people who are involved is still there, and will find a way to get whatever they are doing out there. I suppose. One of the things you try to do, and hopefully I'm trying to do, is to let people know that it's actually out there. Well,
come and participate in it. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
Go and see things. Go to I'm a wee bit of a culture guy. I enjoy going to the theatre. I enjoy going to the cinema. I enjoy going to see bands. I go to a lot of book events, obviously, because of what I do. But I think you need.
Yeah, I know. It's still. I mean, there's just
not that interested in the telly.
With the kind of rise of the kind of smaller festival and even the larger festivals, and you're saying that all of the ones that you look in that are growing, then the will is out there and the desire to kind of interact with people who are making this music or read books or whatever is there.
Absolutely.
Perfect place to finish. Thanks
Smashing.
very much for
Thanks a lot. Thanks for
Cheers.
enjoyed it a lot.
We'll be back soon with someone completely different.